收睇我哋嘅三藩市市長選舉候選人訪問。Sitting next to me is our mayoral candidate, Leno. Hello, Mr. Leno.
So it's a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us here today. You select this place to represent you. So can you tell us the reason why you selected this place?
Well, I think, as you know, I'm a small business owner myself, and so I wanted to choose a small business that is thriving. You can see it's a very beautiful place. Tip my hat to the success of the proprietors here, and also to make the point that it's so important that we protect our small businesses. Clement area here in the Richmond is of significant importance. So this is both literally and figuratively a big issue in my campaign for mayor, that we really need to support our small businesses in every way possible. And as a small business owner for the past 40 years now, I am well aware of the challenges that small businesses face. And oftentimes they face those challenges at City Hall, dealing with city departments. The idea that you need to employ an expediter to get your permits is just counterintuitive. The front counters of our departments serving the public should be doing just that.
You were born in Wisconsin and you moved to San Francisco.
Yes.
So, and now you're running for the mayor for San Francisco.
Yes.
Well, San Francisco is so different.
You can ask that question to just about anyone who has moved to San Francisco, and you may get as many different answers. But if you listen carefully to all those different answers, there's probably a theme. And I think that theme has to do with San Francisco's reputation for welcoming all people. So we're so multicultural, we're so diverse, we're respectful of differences, we celebrate our diversity. That's not the case in so many parts of America, especially as a gay man moving to San Francisco at age 25, looking for a welcoming place, looking for a safe place. And this city provided me enormous opportunities that are not all that accessible today. Basic things like being able to rent an apartment, to start a small business, to be able to work hard and thrive and succeed. And that's, again, among the reasons why I'm running for mayor.
So why do you want to run for mayor besides the questions? Because you say you want to shake things up.
So as I mentioned, I'm a small business owner for 40 years. As my business grew, I somewhat naturally gravitated, once I could get out of my office, to community service. It was the height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the 1980s, so there was no shortage of work to be done. A lot of people were suffering, a lot of people were in need, and I had my good health and interest, and so I got involved. And then overnight, in 1998, my community service became public service when I took a seat on the County Board of Supervisors, and that was the beginning of my life in public office. And I was very uncertain that I would like public life or that I would be any good at it. I didn't have much background in public policy. But about a year into it, I realized I love the public service, and I had fallen in love with the legislative process. Very exciting, sometimes frustrating, sometimes maddening, but it's a real opportunity. And I encourage any young person who's even considering public service to give it serious thought, because one can create great good for the greater public. And I'm from a Jewish family, and there's a Hebrew phrase, tikkun olam, which translates to the repair of the world. We each do our own little piece of leaving this world a little bit better than when we got here. And I've now been termed out of the legislature. I've done all that the law will allow, and I still have a lot of energy and a lot of passion for this city that has given me so much. So I can continue my public service, I think, best serving as mayor of San Francisco.
As we expressed before, we really feel sorry for the pass away of your father. And so can you tell us a little bit about the story between you and your father? What's the figure is him to you?
Sure. Well, I appreciate your thoughts and your concern. My father died just before his 98th birthday. He had been in good health until the end. He had a very full and accomplished life of love and service. I think I learned a lot about community service from my father. A very generous man, a very humble man. Always heartbreaking to lose someone who's so dear, but we should all be so fortunate to pass quietly, without pain, with our family around us. Was fortunate growing up, very loving home, as I mentioned, in the Jewish tradition. I see a lot of similarities between Jewish families and Chinese families. Above all else, we value family and we value education and pursuing academics very seriously. It's in our blood, and it goes back generations and generations.
Do you really focus on your education, and what is your opinion on education? Yeah. Jewish people are clever, everybody knows that.
I don't want to take too much credit. I think my father was more serious about education at times than I was. But he was supportive and encouraging, as was my mother, throughout my school days. You may not know that I was studying to be a rabbi at one time. So I was studying to be a Reform rabbi and was in a seminary for 2 years after I finished college. But sparing you some of the details, I realized that wasn't going to work out. But you know, there's a lot of similarity between clergy and the best of public service. In fact, I joke that of my rabbinical class, that a third of our class went on to finish their studies, to become ordained and serve as rabbis. About a third went into politics, and a third went to the Broadway stage.
About education, public
Yes.
education, you said you encourage young people, young men, and to take part in the public service. And so do you have any idea on how you will improve the education here in San Francisco?
You know, I was very fortunate. 6 of my 8 years in the state Senate, I served as chair of the Senate Budget Committee. But I was in that position when the economy collapsed in 2008, and the state lost significant amounts of revenue, and we had to make serious cuts. There's also a funding formula so that approximately 50% of all the revenue that the state takes in to its general fund does go to public education. But because that revenue fell, the amount that went to education fell equally, and we had to make horrible cuts. It was very painful, but then the economy did begin to recover. And as budget chair, I made sure that as much as we had to, of course, by law, but then even more than that, we had to restore our education funding as quickly as possible. When San Francisco's community college was at great risk of closing because the accreditation commission threatened our accreditation, our enrollment numbers fell dramatically, and the college gets funding from the state dependent upon the level of enrollment. So as the enrollment fell, the funding fell, and as the funding fell, the school had to contract further, and fewer people enrolled, and it was in a downward death spiral. But as chair of the Budget Committee and working with Assemblyman Phil Ting, he was chairing the Budget Committee on the Assembly side as I was chairing it on the Senate side, and working together, we were able to provide $120 million specifically for San Francisco's community college.
If you're elected, which one will be your priority to tackle with this lot?
Well, I think I've covered 2 of them already. Also focusing on the cost of housing, which of course has gotten so out of control. There is a local ordinance that requires that a percentage of all new housing development in the city must be below market rate. Now that's something I worked on nearly 20 years ago when I was on the Board of Supervisors, and we've produced well over 5,000 units of affordable housing. And when you think that only 10% of San Franciscans can afford to purchase market rate housing, and only 15% of San Franciscans can afford to rent market rate housing. When we talk about affordable housing, we're talking about housing for just about all of us.
Among all the candidates, what makes you special?
Well,
About the big smile.
you want me to blow my own horn here, right? There are some obvious differences. None of the other candidates have been in business for 40 years, so there's a lot of experience I bring from that. We've all served on the County Board of Supervisors, but I'm the only one who has also served 6 years in the State Assembly and 8 years in the State Senate, and there just are a lot of issue areas and experiences, and very specifically, years and years of taking on challenging issues and learning that to be able to accomplish certain goals, to get a difficult piece of legislation introduced, work with opposing voices, making amendments to the bill to keep it moving forward, to make sure there's always majority support for the bill, getting it through both houses and then to the governor's desk, working with the governor along the way to make sure that his concerns are met so that we don't face a veto when we get there. Those are all skills that I can bring to the mayor's office.
So in the city level and in the state level, you have a lot of legislation.
Yes.
So I'm gonna ask you which one you're the most proud of.
That's a difficult question. It's like choosing among your children who's your favorite. I don't know that I could tell you that there's specifically one or two of which I'm most proud, but I can tell you that if there's a theme, a common theme throughout all of my legislative work, it is fighting for those without a voice, fighting for the underdog, fighting for people who are faced with some problem, some challenge, and they need help. That's what I think a public servant is there for. When I was on the Board of Supervisors, I authored a local ordinance which is known as the Equal Access to Services Ordinance, and it requires that the city provide translation in departments that serve the public most directly. And we know that we have seen some increases in property crime, and I'm hearing more and more stories where victims of these crimes can't even find a police officer who speaks Chinese in a Chinese community, in a Chinese neighborhood. Well, first of all, that's illegal. I wrote the law, but it's very serious if a San Franciscan can't get the service that they need in their hour of need, and that's why I wrote the legislation 20 years ago. So I know that that one piece of legislation, when it is working, has provided a lot of benefit to our immigrant communities, and so I'm very proud of it.
Okay, so my last question is, among all the candidates,
Yes.
the mayor candidates, which one do you think you will vote for besides yourself? Yes.
Well, I can tell you that I have recently offered Jane Kim my second vote and Angela Alioto my third vote.
Thank you so much, Mr. Leno, for joining us here today. Thank you so much.
Crystal, it's my great pleasure, and you do a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah.